Why do people feel like interest rates are super high and that they must come down? I know I'm regurgitating already known facts here. Historically, the average US mortgage rate is 7.74. A few of my friends shopping around are getting about 6.67 and are complaining how high their rates are. Have Americans just been spoiled by cheap, easy money? The past decade of low rates was an exception. Rates today are still cheap, historically speaking. There's no reason to expect cheap rates like of the last decade to be normal. And there's no reason to expect them to go back down. Because in addition to the higher rates, housing prices have increased dramatically, so they're getting double screwed. 6.5 wouldn't be as big of a deal if the house was still $300,000, but now it's $500,000. Plus the historically low rates were so recent that it feels like you literally missed a boat and are now screwed and possibly pushed out of the market altogether because your purchasing power has been practically cut in half. It's an issue of overall affordability. Rates are higher relative to home prices and wages. The thing worrying me more is that there's so many buyers waiting in the sidelines for interest rates to go down. It'll basically be a repeat of 2020, 2021 when prices skyrocketed and buyers had to basically waive everything, pay 10 over ask. Because the market won't react fast enough on the downswing. If the prices were in line with affordability and rates, nobody would be complaining. Rise like a rocket, fall like a feather. It's the overall affordability, not just the rate. 7 on a $250,000 home in 2010 is wildly different from 7 of $600,000 home in 2023. The fact of the matter is that people's incomes haven't kept up with inflation. Cheap historically speaking compared to what? They were higher than today from the late 70s to early 1990s. But the current rate is certainly not cheap compared to any time before the late 70s or after early 1990s. Maybe normal but not cheap. The 1980s had the highest recorded interest rates in the country's history. The interest rates are highish at the same time that the median price of a house is now almost $500,000. While wages for half the population are still similar to what they were in the 1980s. The rates don't feel cheap. With home prices being so high, those rates make house buying more difficult for lots of people. History doesn't mean anything if house prices and rates are both higher. At 3, people could afford the prices. At 7, you're adding hundreds of dollars a month to a payment. Honestly, something has to give. Yes, my in-laws had a much higher rate back when they bought in the 70s. But their home was only like $40,000 and their mortgage was less than $300 a month. Most people don't make enough to support a home that is worth way more than it was 3 years ago and a high interest rate. Because this happened. $250,000 house 500,000 house 2.8 $450,000 house 5.5. In the span of a few years, Americans aren't greedy. We stupidly allow corporations to buy private homes which should be absolutely illegal. Because of relativity and recency bias. No one cares about historic average. They know getting a 3 rate was possible last year, so 7 seems outrageous. Interest rates plus inflation is a killer combo. When was the last time we had these two happening together? Like many, we wish we bought a few years ago. We're buying now affordably, and if we can refinance later, that's a plus. Yes, spoiled by low interest rates of recent past sort of, but the problem is that home prices have gone up exponentially since the last time interest was that high, and they haven't really come down much if at all. It makes already difficult to attain home prices completely out of reach for many. People should be happy interest rates are higher because the home prices would have inflated far more had they not increased. As a homeowner now, I'm impartial. However, if I was a buyer, I would want interest rates to be higher because it will correlate with a lower home value, and extra payments go a long way in paying off the mortgage. Rates tend to not be this high while we also have inflation and high prices. Having them all high up will break something in the market, and they are stating that fact. The issue isn't the rates, it's the rates with high prices. The price for homes would have been okay with 2-3% rates, not 7-8. Eventually people need to realize prices need to go down. Because you could have had a 3 rate as recently as last year. After a few years of 6-7 rates, this will be the new normal and it will just be what buyers expect. Yes, they are spoiled. They feel left out of the opportunities that the 2008, 2019 and 2020, 2022 ultra-low interest rates presented, and want to see it again for themselves. Like you pointed out, we're returning to historical averages. Those averages are a reality that many prospective home buyers have never lived in. When you nail down a rate like 2.67.74 sounds stupid high. It's because homes are inflated with high rates, one has to come down. Because it's been lower than that for well over a decade. I think rates are still too low. They probably need to reach 9 to start crushing the cost of living overpriced university, healthcare, cars, etc. It's not like corporations are passing down all the free money they received down as wages to the average employee. I bought a home for $875,000 in 2017 in a probate sale that needed $400,000 worth of improvements. I ran out of money and it still needs $150,000 in improvements. Luckily for me, today I could sell for $1,700,000. I'm locked in at 2.5 fixed and my monthly is $4,300. If today you purchase it W20 down, your payment at 6 would be $10,000 more including property taxes. Guess I can't ever afford to move. You assume people have any knowledge about history. Have Americans just been spoiled by cheap, easy money? Yes. Also, FTH want a 2000 SF starter home with quartz countertops and marble showers, then complain they can't afford it. We now have a whole generation that thinks near zero interest rates is totally normal, where of course historically it's the one and only time humans were stupid enough to do that. Usually home prices are lower at this interest rate. Prices are still inflated but starting to come down in areas of the US. I'm 37. I've owned homes for about the last 16-17 years. The most I ever paid on a mortgage was 4.25 and currently have 2.625. I don't care that the rate was 15 in 1979. It's not 1979. Houses also cost a fraction of what they do today relative to income levels. The pricing has gotten so absurd that interest rates above 7 can really bury you in a loan, marry you to the house. Are Americans spoiled? Yes, yes they are. By so many things. People have a recency bias where they think the last few years before their viewpoint is the new normal. It's totally debilitating to know that your neighbor who bought 18 months ago likely locked in 3 and has a payment 1,000s lower per month than if you bought today. Sure, rates look fine compared to 1985, but horrible when you realize the whole neighborhood refied last year and you are arbitrarily stuck paying way more. Rates were at historic lows for basically a generation. Prices went through the roof, especially there at the end. Because these prices are still where they were when rates were 2.73. Rates have more than doubled, so home prices are functionally way more expensive than they were a year ago. Most people go by monthly payment, they don't just have an extra 30 to throw at a mortgage. We as human beings always like to compare. When your friend or family has a rate for 2.8 for 30 years, you will always feel the current are super high. 4.5 on a loan is okay. Anything greater than that makes home ownership a problem.